We want to help put 100,000 electric vehicles on the road by 2030. Our entry point into this market is to unlock the decision. It's not about finding the vehicle, selling the access card, or installing the charging station. It's about connecting the traditional world of combustion engines with this new world of electric vehicles. If companies do not adopt new electric vehicles, the general public will not be able to obtain them at a low cost. Therefore, we will not succeed in scaling up this electrification project, even though electric vehicles make a great deal of sense. In 2022, the general public adopted more electric vehicles than businesses. That trend reversed by the end of 2025. Charging vehicles has nothing to do with filling up with gas. There's a virtuous equation with the electrical grid that is at the heart of the challenge of electrifying our energy use. You were drawing a parallel with Axio because you also provide some consulting services in addition to your SaaS model, is that right? Actually, the parallel applies to any company that's currently in a transitional phase where inevitably the client encounters a new topic that demands new competencies. They are compelled to manage it because of regulatory requirements, for instance, regarding carbon footprint assessments or shareholder obligations, but they've never been confronted with such a situation before. So instead of simply replacing an existing solution, you need to explain to them that there's a genuine need to be addressed, one that truly holds significant value for them. So this explanation and outreach is necessary to reach these accounts. And if you compare with carbon accounting firms, they do carbon assessments, but once a year. It only lasts 2-3 months for small companies. For others, it's a bit more ongoing. To achieve this, to provide support, to convey the message to the right decision makers in these companies, well, you really need some guidance. And ultimately, if you want them to implement your recommendations and for a real action plan to be put in place, often on their own, they struggle a bit. So if your mission is impact, to get them moving, don't be afraid to do some of their work yourself, even if it means straying from the SaaS model, which is less attractive to the small tech sphere, but not to the transition.
And how did you get it started?
The team has been forming for 4 years now. Of the 4-person team, 3 of us were engineers from the same graduating class at Ex-INES, Octave and I. Octave and I were very good friends. I did my entire military service with him at Ex. We camped under the same tarp with our FAMAS rifles in our sleeping bags. So that forged a strong friendship and a desire to do things together. But we had no idea we'd end up starting a business. And we ended up enrolling in an entrepreneurship master's program at HEC, which then gave us the idea to assemble a small team of 4 people and give ourselves about 5 months to see if we could really come up with something cool.
Before or after Berkeley?
That was just before Berkeley, actually. It was 2 months before we went to Berkeley, which kept us busy for about 3 months there, where we were living together as roommates, making all the initial discoveries and groundwork. So that's how the team came together, with 2 individuals more focused on energy and 2 others more inclined towards deep tech. And so that created a core group of 4 people who were really keen to work on energy transition.
So you're off to Berkeley with the idea?
No, we're off to Berkeley with kilowatt hours. It's cool. The energy transition is exciting and we really want to work in it. Where are the kilowatt hours? We had quickly looked at photovoltaic topics, but very soon we ruled it out given Inez's and Octave's profiles, who aren't good with soldering irons, but much better with a keyboard. And so we've switched to mobility's kilowatt hours. Vehicle charging, that's going to be quite a mess. There are things we could optimize. So when we arrived at Berkeley, we realized that recharging cars is nothing like filling up with gasoline. There's a virtuous equation involving the power grid, which is at the very core of the challenge to electrify our energy uses and to continue decarbonizing the electricity mix. This energy equation that engineers were drilled on in engineering school, well, it really consumed a lot of our time. So at Berkeley, it took us 2 months to finally pinpoint the issue, which is ultimately why we launched Nelson today.
Who is?
The idea is that businesses must adopt electric vehicles because in the first instance, from an impact point of view, new vehicles are always initially distributed to companies before they become available on the second-hand market. So if businesses don't adopt new electric vehicles, the general public won't have access to them at an affordable price. So we won't be able to scale up this electrification project, even though electric vehicles make a tremendous amount of sense.
And what is the reality of adoption on the consumer side and on the B2B side?
Back in 2022, the general public was adopting more electric vehicles than businesses were. That trend completely reversed by the end of 2025. Today, 1 in 4 new vehicles is registered as an electric vehicle within companies. So things have really drastically evolved in just 3 years. But at first, vehicles were very expensive and not necessarily up to expectations for the job, because a company fleet will get to that, but the goal is for the vehicle to be a work tool. So The early adopter individual, he's motivated to switch to electric. He thinks it's good. His kids put a little pressure on him. He has the means, he goes for it. So this is that well-known initial phase of adoption. Companies were a bit reluctant, except for those with significant commitments. And since then, things have shifted in the other direction because it's economically pertinent and pressure is being put on businesses because, as I mentioned earlier, a resale market needs to be established afterwards. So their primary obstacle, which we've begun to address, is discerning what's true from what's false. Am I going to lose time? How do I explain this to my driver? Am I adding extra miles? They had no factual information, no real knowledge of their fleet, because until then, it was just a support function.
And so what do the numbers look like right now?
By the end of 2025, between 23 and 24% of B2B registrations will be for fully electric vehicles. And October was the best month for electric vehicle registrations in businesses. November was better than October. December was better than November. So we're really seeing a huge acceleration. However, on one particular segment, that of company vehicles, there's still a huge aspect concerning utility vehicles. And the fact is that utility vehicles will still need in 10 years, whereas certain company vehicles we won't need anymore.
And the difference between them, what explains it?
The first thing is that company cars nowadays are personal vehicles. Their range is 500 kilometers. The battery chemistry is well established. Manufacturers have launched new models. They are in their third, fourth, fifth innovation cycle. So costs are reduced and it meets simple use cases like a home-to-work commute, weekends and holidays. For commercial vehicles, when transporting cargo or doing operational work, you don't want to lose time. So it took longer to motivate them, and especially the manufacturer's offer wasn't the first to be implemented. So the point is product availability, and the reason for companies' indecision is, oh, I'm really scared for my business. My manager, okay, if he loses a bit of time, my technician, he brings me 85 euros an hour. He's not going to waste time.
And so you, in that context, what's your contribution?
We're here to finally overcome a cognitive bias within these companies, which results in no one daring to make a decision to purchase an electric vehicle. What we're providing are rational arguments as an impartial, agnostic party, stating, friends, Robert, your technician who repairs elevators, he has never exceeded 220 kilometers in a single day. The 15 times he did it, he would have found a charging solution during his lunch break. These are the arguments to explain to his manager that it will work out. You can electrify Robert. It turns out that there are 120 Roberts. So you thought you'd only use 15? We can go and get a certain number. On the other hand, Tanguy is out of the question. Tanguy, today, it'll be too complicated. It'll be a waste of time. You have every reason to be concerned, but here's the order in which you can approach things. So our entry point into this market is to unlock the decision making. It's not about finding the vehicle, selling the badge, or installing the charging station. It's about connecting the traditional world of internal combustion with this new world of electric vehicles so they can anticipate what's going to happen. So it is simulation that acts as the key driver for decision making among our clients.
And what exactly is the value for those companies? Is it a bare regulatory compliance, or is it to operate the transition much more quickly than others?
The value we provide to our client also depends on the specific reason why they embarked on this electrification project. There are essentially three main drivers that lead companies to decide to initiate their electrification process. These include shareholding structure, the overall corporate strategy, pressure from investors, commitments like net zero and SBTi, which represent strong corporate social responsibility pledges at the enterprise level.
That's the CAC 40.
It's the CAC 40 or large companies operating under LBOs that make significant commitments because it unlocks green bonds, which means additional investments. So you can find large mid-sized companies that have taken on strong decarbonization commitments because investment funds are applying pressure. The second lever that pushes you to decarbonize your activity can be commercial commitments. You respond to tenders to manage water in a city, or you're a subcontractor for the Orange Group, and then you're imposed with quite significant ESG targets. So to win your business, you have to prove that you're decarbonizing. And the third lever is regulatory. And the first two don't necessarily mean you have to electrify your vehicle fleet, but if your fleet is a truly significant part of your carbon footprint, then absolutely you immediately translate your objectives into electrification targets. And so for these three reasons, they're accelerating their electrification. So our added value for very mature fleets is ultimately to say, I absolutely must meet this year's target. I must succeed in ordering 150 electric vehicles this year. If I mess these up, I'm still going to lose a whole lot of money and for the next 4 years to come. because the miscasting of the Tanguy that we were talking about, well, for a full 4 years, Tanguy will be driving his car. First, he'll be bothered and inconvenienced every day. His manager will be frustrated. We'll have recharging costs that are higher than expected and lost operational time. So today, what we sell is an avoided expense if you make a mistake. And the objective is afterwards for the client's electric vehicle to really help him make real OPEX savings in managing his vehicles. But for the moment, it's really in the upstream phase to order the vehicle.
So then what precisely is it that you're offering for sale? Yeah.
At Nelson, we operate with 2 distinct types of activities, and what we offer will naturally depend on the client's level of maturity. One of these is a consulting activity where essentially we lay the groundwork for electrification within the company, aiming to motivate them to fully commit. Therefore, we will propose a comprehensive electrification strategy for their entire fleet based on the current operational status of their vehicles. Our second activity is a software-based one, where the idea is more like, I need to order my first electric vehicle and eventually stop using internal combustion vehicles. So, throughout my entire transition, I'll face challenges and have decisions to make. And so, we have this kind of support tool, this productized electrification project manager. For these 2 activities, the core is to aggregate data, conduct simulations, and map out actual usage in order to be truly factual and to provide a layer of intelligence above the fundamental administrative tasks.
Does the software itself have value, or is it really all the data you manage to aggregate, which allows you to create meaning from the software component?
The data that we gather holds significant value for the client. The software itself holds value for us because it enables us to spend less time with the client. So ultimately, we definitely need both of these things simultaneously. If we have the right arguments readily available within the software, we can greatly facilitate the discussion to persuade someone to adopt an electric vehicle. I want to be able to demonstrate to you on your tour plan from the past 6 months. Actually, regarding your route, you were afraid of a specific day, but a particular landmark that will become your best friend. Oh yeah, I know this street intersection that can work out for me. So we managed to help them envision their path. Therefore, for complicated cases, truly leveraging dynamic software, it's going to allow people to get on board with the change. But the very core of how we make decisions is based on the data that we have meticulously calculated. And so ultimately, we already gain a significant amount of value just from the data calculations that we consistently perform. And that's precisely why here internally at Nelson, we have both a dedicated data team and a specialized software team to truly deploy the full double act of what makes up Nelson's secret sauce.
And this data, where do you get it?
Fleets today are already quite well equipped. They have several providers and they have data available in multiple locations. As for us, there are 3 specific types of data that we will collect from the client's data cloud. The data that comes from fleet management, the composition of the fleet, fuel cards, toll collections, everything that relates to what is necessary for operating the vehicle today. We're going to translate all of that into trip data and mileage data. We can also retrieve data directly from the vehicles themselves, either because the client has installed specific devices or because we will connect to the vehicle and collect that data. And we'll also take the business data, like Roberto Tanguy, whom we mentioned once again. He has a driver app, a smartphone to know his intervention log. That gives us a data point. These are the client data we're going to cross-reference. It's truly this data cross-referencing that makes us strong. And we'll put alongside that all existing public charging stations, the possibility of home charging, company site infrastructure to create this digital fleet twin and an electrified twin to really ask ourselves many questions about it.
And how many of you are there in France who have this kind of activity, and what fundamentally makes you different?
There are many different players who are interested in automotive fleets, but in a variety of ways, and everyone is eager to seize this new opportunity. There's a significant paradigm shift occurring with the advent of electric vehicles, which completely reshuffles the deck, effectively eliminating the Total Energies fuel card and ending that particular player's monopoly in fleet management. So everyone wants to tackle this in a slightly different way. Total included by creating offers for electric vehicle charging, obviously. It's a bit paradoxical to have a player like Total offering to install charging stations at your home. But yes, they are integrators of offers and hardware charging solutions because it remains an energy business. And Total is now called Total Energies with an S.
A potential exit?
No, we see more value for us with other players, either those closer to the automotive sector or those more aligned with software development. It's either because there's a fundamental DNA mismatch with the Total group, but the day they make us a serious offer, perhaps things will be different. But I believe we create more significant value for others. Well, so it's not necessarily total, for instance. Among the various players who are interested in our specific subject matter, there's truly no one who holds this particular agnostic position regarding data, or else it's simply a case of consulting firms. I think that in an AI era, focusing on SaaS and consulting truly makes sense for the future business model we need to develop. So we also defend it quite pragmatically, the fact of putting humans with our clients, but everyone does it to defend something else and therefore do some analysis to sell a batch of recharges on which we take commissions. It's not the same as if you project yourself a few years into the future, will what you'll be selling be different from what you're selling today? And the way you sell it, won't it be precisely more human intervention and the ability to develop a custom software component with AI every single time? Is it necessarily a software component? I don't know. Maybe that's the end of the answer. But the first point is that we had the bad idea to enter a market that had an expiration date because our primary business stops when there are no more internal combustion vehicles left in the fleet. Well, that means our impact will have been monstrous. We want to participate in putting 100,000 electric vehicles on the road by 2030. So there's still a lot of work to be done to get these electric vehicles on the road. However, one thing is for sure, as the market grows more mature, we must reinvent ourselves and develop new value propositions. So in essence, we're moving forward with a mature approach, hoping to stay a little ahead of the adoption wave for these electric vehicles. So in just a few years, the profession we practice today will be radically different, and that's what's truly exciting.
Let's go back to Berkeley. Was it the right spot to start? They're more advanced than in Europe on EVs, electric vehicles.
Indeed, for us to launch the Run Nelson adventure, we began with a 3-month stay in Berkeley, all 4 of us. Ines, Octave, Julian, and myself. We went to Berkeley, not knowing at the time that we would be working on electric vehicles in detail without any prior knowledge of automotive fleets. We went there with the desire to innovate in the energy transition, and to use our time there to work as a team, perhaps gaining a slightly different perspective. So California had led interesting projects on fleets. However, the current context means that it's not necessarily in the US that we should look for Nelson's product roadmap. But there had been some initiatives that we actually discovered while we were there. So Berkeley, we went there primarily to conduct a 4-way tunnel to test this collaboration rather than truly expecting to gain any crucial insights for our specific market. And it turned out to be quite a foundational period for us nonetheless.
And so Europe and France, they are quite relevant markets and more advanced, especially when compared to other markets around the world.
Europe, it's a market that is truly advancing much faster than others on electric vehicles and is more resilient regarding its commitments to decarbonization and climate.
Even though there has been a step back recently.
There was a rate on vehicles. There was a rollback on the 2035 regulation, which was the main public driver for. It was certain we'd move towards electric vehicles. So there are interpretive frameworks that need to be refined on this topic. If we go into details, we have indeed eased up a bit on the package.
It remains marginal.
Actually, it's not that it remains marginal. It's that already regarding Nelson, if I'm being very personal, it rather put pressure on fleets because it doesn't change the fact that they need to accelerate their decarbonization. And for the general public and the automotive industry, it eases things a little bit, and rightly so, because instead of being the target is 0 grams of CO2 per kilometer. In short, by 2035, 90% of all vehicle sales would need to be 100% electric. That leaves some leeway, let's say. But the mindset and the transition are fully underway and very strongly. Yeah, and the electric vehicles, we would have liked to invent them before gasoline cars.
And so France is rather more advanced in comparison to other European countries?
It depends on the perspective. My own perspective is very much B2B focused. From a broader global perspective, in the Nordic countries, we know there's no debate. In Sweden and Norway, more than 95% of all vehicle sales are electric because they've implemented very strong incentive mechanisms, such as free parking, free tolls, and I could list many other tax-related benefits. From this perspective, we actually have to consider the maturity of their addressable market, which means looking at the number of cars and their electrification rate. If you achieve 60% electrification in Norway, but the car fleet is very small, it's better to go to France, where there's 20% electrification, but ultimately more electric vehicle orders. The countries that are on the most promising trajectories today are the UK and France. Germany also made a significant effort and major advancements in 2025. Other markets with high volume are Spain and Italy. a charging network that is much less developed, but a fleet structure quite similar to France's in terms of overall volume. So these could potentially be very interesting territories for us to explore. All this is to say, the Nordic countries are quite far ahead. France in particular represents one of the best business cases for electric vehicles. And so we believe we are in the right place within the B2B prism and regarding the relevance of EVs compared to a country like Poland, for example.
Tell us about the very beginning. So who had the initial idea and how did you actually get started?
Our journey began a little over 4 years ago. None of the four of us specifically had the initial idea, but I believe there was a strong impetus truly connected to the broader transition. So, in more detail, how exactly did it all unfold? Ultimately, I met Julian during the XHEC Entrepreneur Masters program, and Julian and I were the only two from our entire cohort who had previously worked in solar energy, specifically in photovoltaics. He had worked on slope solar projects with hydraulic storage for somewhat isolated areas, and I had worked in photovoltaics and small to medium-sized power plants in Chile, which is an incredible place for solar. So we had discovered the electrical equation of, for the various countries, the interest in renewables, but with a measured control, the intermittency. Let's call that the kilowatt hour.
And why don't you both stay in solar?
That's a good question. I think that's part of the uncertainties or opportunities. The point I would add is that we had already discussed this topic. We pitched an initial idea during an impact week. We pitched a project on agri-photovoltaics. The idea is to consider that perhaps I can intelligently generate electricity while improving the production of strawberries or grapes. Basically, instead of trying to capture the most sunlight, I'll try to generate the best possible shade over the fields, and I'll also produce electricity, but I'll focus on high value-added production. In short, putting panels on fields rather than debating whether to plant crops or install panels. There's a great company. It's a
bit like what Enrise does with supermarket parking lots, which is a portfolio company. That's a recent addition.
Yes, obviously this is connected to solar energy. Perhaps it might have led us to develop solar installations on rooftops and in warehouses. However, the real topic was the equation with agriculture to explore somewhat different use cases. And so that was something that interested us quite a bit. We did a first pitch, and that's how we really got to know each other well. And actually, it turns out that I knew Octave and Ines very, very well too, who are therefore the two additional partners of Nesson. Both of them for different reasons, genuinely wanting to undertake something, why not? But especially to be connected to energy challenges, and with, unlike Julian and myself, enormous technical skills. Ines on machine learning, data, NLP, applied mathematics, and Octave on infrastructure, cybersecurity, networks, more conventional IT, let's say data and information technology. Octave and I, we were very, very close friends. We served in the army together. For 3 months, we practically slept in the same sleeping bag with our weapons. So we're still very good friends. He's my best man. So obviously that formed an additional connection for why not to join in. So we tested for a month. We were in 2 teams, a vehicle team and a photovoltaic team. In both cases, there was kilowatt hour, so that suited us broadly. And so we refined the research on both projects in parallel, keeping each other informed as a team. Afterwards, by the way, that remained with us for quite a long time. The team-based operation, cross-functional teams to test things. Solar power we've largely set aside because what might have truly concerned us would essentially require us to take up soldering irons to go and inspect every single power plant and then recycle all the panels. And we weren't the right team to do that. On the other hand, with vehicle charging, there was something that seemed a bit more technical, involving more data and quite extensive, truly important problems to solve. And so that's what led us to this subject, rather than the two of us staying focused on photovoltaics. It really clicked incredibly well with Ines, who is very, very different from me in her initial reactions and her way of reasoning. But we very quickly find ourselves agreeing on a lot of different subjects as well. So that created a truly wonderful and beautiful complementarity. Personally, I quickly realized it would have been a disaster to start a business with 3 Alfreds. And so testing things with the 4 of us together, that was a huge advantage.
What I was going to say is that so 4 is in common. Didn't they ask you at the start, are you sure you want to stay at 4? Did you ever ask yourself that question?
What's more, since we were doing these rather academic entrepreneurship studies with these HEC Entrepreneur Masters, many companies emerge, but they all follow the same playbook, the same approach to business, or nearly. Well, first, this Masters allows you to start a company right after graduation, whereas you'd have no idea how to do it otherwise, so healthier for him. So first of all, So what exactly do you dislike about the XHEC playbook? Before I criticize the XHEC playbook, because I don't really have that many criticisms, I'd say that in that playbook, we were often told, all four of you have an engineering background. So what's the difference between your profiles? Plus, there are four of you and your friends. It's unmanageable. We had our own way of interpreting it. What truly helped us solidify this decision was telling ourselves in January 2022, that for the next 5 months, we wouldn't question continuing the project. We'd play it out as if it were the actual business we were launching. And after those 5 months, we asked ourselves the question, should we launch it or not? Are we truly right to do it? That allowed us to dismiss all the external comments that everyone was making to us. And we saw that it could truly be 4 supporting pillars. I developed a very strong liking for the business side, for commerce, for convincing, for using eloquence effectively in the job, for putting in energy, for being the kind of leader you might typically look for in someone from HEC. And in fact, that really stimulated me. And I felt I could bring something truly valuable to it. So it moved me away from the engineer profile, if you know what I mean.
Was it easy for you to understand all of that? You very quickly took to it and embraced the role?
Pretty quickly. Later, when your company doesn't exist yet and you haven't experienced anything, you don't ask yourself what it's like to be a startup CEO when you'll be 10, when you'll be 20, when you'll be 50. Today, to sleep well, I don't ask myself if I'll be a good CEO when we're 50, because we first need to hold on as we are today. So at each stage, you have to adapt a bit. But at that point, they also showed me a great deal of trust that I hadn't quite grasped. It's when we had that famous meeting about, all right, guys, go or no go? Should we launch this company? They were quite encouraging, almost saying, actually, there are 4 of us to make sure this goes well. It might be good if one of us could help make decisions or carry them out.
And at that moment, when you incorporate, you make a shareholders agreement, you are accompanied. I mean, you're from Ecole, so I imagine there are still advisors around you. How?
For this initial brainstorming session, we're just among ourselves. Yeah. We prepared the questions we wanted to ask and really challenge each other. We went to a farm for 24 hours to reflect on all of this on our own. But at that point, we're not formalizing a pact at all. We know we'll do it if there's a go decision, but we already need to discuss a few things. And we are accompanied because throughout the year, we were repeatedly asked the questions we needed to consider among ourselves to be sure we wanted to work together. And so I'd say those reflections helped us. And they said, well, one of the criteria is that all 4 of us are together. And if there are things that overlap, it's good that, Alfred, you help us decide and that you take on a bit of this leadership role. So that was almost part of a prerequisite for the thing to get started. So for me, at that point, it was a bit of a relief to think, okay, maybe they need me to take on this role. Because before, I might have thought, actually, everyone wants to have that role, you know? And ultimately, not everyone has that much energy to put into.
For you, it's a question of energy.
It's energy first.
To be the right leader for the company. No, but energy is something that is so essential to be exposed to a market and constantly explain what you do. Never miss an opportunity to pitch. It still takes a tremendous amount of energy to do that constantly. Especially when you're working on a transitional subject with many people who are resistant. We all get constantly bothered about the need to decarbonize air travel during Christmas dinner. Well, for us all the time, the electric vehicle is a constant source of annoyance. So you really need to be confronted with that and always maintain the energy for it. So we truly had to be prepared to put in the hard work for it. So that was a really crucial aspect for starting a new venture. A good leader isn't necessarily just full of energy. They can be highly organized, structured, and execute well. So I believe that we are all leaders in our own unique way. What I meant by the leadership aspect is about animating the team, really shaking things up and instilling a sense of motivation in absolutely everyone. So it's about creating a bit of excitement within our entire crew.
What do you do in your daily life? What have you kept?
I myself spend a great deal of time in external interactions, whether with clients or with prospects or with key players who know our market very well, and for whom it would be extremely beneficial to know Nelson over the long term, to position us in the right place and to challenge the current narrative.
In an interview, still the same?
An interview? What kind of interview?
For recruiting new people?
Well, ultimately, obviously, I'm involved in the various recruitment processes, but we're not in a phase where we're hiring one person a month or two people per quarter. So it doesn't take a crazy amount of time. It depends on the period. Perhaps it took more time during other phases, but I'm very exposed to the key players in our market, ultimately. The partners, fleet managers, CSR directors, general management. Have you hired a head of sales since then? No. So I've actually been in charge of sales and sales development for 3 years here at Nelson. And we recruited our first hunter salesperson a little over a year ago now, with the intention of delegating the management of certain sales cycles to him, but not taking over the sales department. That direction, why not? However, we just hired this January 2026, a much more senior sales rep who knows our market very well. But his role today is to hunt and develop key accounts rather than taking over sales management. Sales management is a sales rep and a bid manager, so there's no sales management. It's about contributing to our performance and getting clients.
And the go-to-market today, how do you do it?
So that right there, that was our very first recruitment. Well, I'm telling this from a human interest angle. At Nelson, go-to-market means identifying the best customer segments, how we're going to approach them, how we ensure we do it very quickly, and how we articulate our offering and product so it truly resonates with their needs. So it's about building a kind of machine that allows us to say, great, we found interested fleets, we know what to tell them and in what order, and they're going to sign. So as of today, for our go-to-market considerations, we hired Pearl a little over 2 years ago. And Pearl, her initial mission was essentially to be Alfred's partner for all business development topics because we weren't quite sure how to organize all of that. So we sorted and broke down the various target fleets. We prospected together, we tested our pitches, we implemented our CRMs, and we established connections with our partners. Today, we are either engaged in direct acquisition, so we call people on the phone, or we go to events, or we have indirect acquisitions, where we have players in our ecosystem who introduce us to clients because highlighting Nelson has value for them as someone who sells charging stations, finances vehicles, installs charging stations, or maintains them.
Who, for example, recommends you?
The automotive leasing companies are able to recommend us. In fact, the underlying idea is to consider this. All those who are currently working with their final fleets, they are seeking to assist their clients in some way or another. And when there's a paradigm shift, like the one with electric vehicles, it's certainly in everyone's best interest to try and redistribute the cards to take market share from one company or another. And so the big elephants of the automotive fleet market are the car leasing companies. Lessor is who handles your long-term vehicle leases on 4-year contracts. That way you don't have to pay for the vehicle in full. You pay for it over 4 years with a set mileage limit and so on. These car leasing companies, they work with entire fleets. It's good to offer competitive financing rates, but they also sell many additional services, tires, insurance, the handling of certain claims, and so on. So they can introduce us to their fleet to strengthen their message, to be more strategic. So they invite us to client gatherings. We're invited to their events, and there we pitch to 10, 15 clients. Then it's up to us to convert these into strong opportunities.
What has been most effective among all these strategies from the beginning?
Actually, I'm not currently thinking about it in terms of finding just one strategy. Primarily because we're involved in enterprise level sales, we're compelled to adopt a multi-touch approach, as the term goes. So we have to work through several channels simultaneously because ultimately the decision comes down to a kind of committee that isn't formalized but relies on 3 or 4 key influencers. There's a champion, a budget owner, a relevant stakeholder, a user equivalent, and 2 or 3 sponsors or advisors.
So who is he? He's responsible for fleets, for purchasing management, and a bit of CSR.
Exactly. The summit, the personas we'll be targeting at Nelson will obviously include those responsible for fleet management, those in charge of purchasing vehicles, and those overseeing decarbonization objectives. So that's fleet directors, procurement departments, and CSR departments. And in the loop, we always have general management, financial management, and operations management. So ultimately, for successful customer acquisition, we must engage with the top decision makers, demonstrate the value to fleet managers, and secure a recommending partner. That way, we effectively surround them, and that's how we manage to successfully close the deal. So we have this approach that's really account-centric rather than lead-centric. And so this entire sales strategy, it's incredibly interesting. It's a mathematical spider web to solve every single time.
Tell us about one thing that has positively surprised you since the beginning, and on the other hand, one thing that has negatively surprised you in terms of the activity's development. Did you think it would progress at such a rapid pace?
I'll start with something that surprised us very positively and then went wrong, but which, well, went wrong. Our first client, Nelson, the very reason for launching Nelson was a car fleet we encountered. It's a fleet that operates and repairs elevators. So in fact, they have technicians everywhere who travel around. There aren't 1 million elevator technicians, and this elevator technician, he has 3,000 vehicles in France, and he tells us we have no idea how to organize our electrification. We don't know who to start with. Can you? Yeah, we'd really like to electrify. You ask us how to do it, but we don't really know who to electrify in what order. And we realized there are 2 or 3 data sets on which we could perform some analysis to prove that X or Y person could switch to electric. So he gives us all the data. For 3-4 months, we do POCs, we show them things, etc. 6 months later, we signed the first contract worth 40,000 euros annually with that specific client. It was thanks to this that we conducted a small initial fundraising round with business angels to try and replicate that success. We then managed to get into 2 or 3 more accounts. So this was our big proof of traction. And we were glad not to just raise with slides, but to say, in fact, we have 3-4 clients, one of whom signed a real deal. We think we can duplicate it. We wouldn't have come knocking on your door if we didn't have this first thing. We spent a year with him, and since then, we no longer work with that client. And that was an interesting lesson for us. We said our market has an expiration date. It's certain that clients will organize themselves. They'll recruit people to manage their electrification. We absolutely don't want churn because we need the largest possible fleet of vehicles to work on these clients' electric vehicles tomorrow. So this venture with this client, in the end, it's not a big deal if we don't work with him anymore, because sometimes you have to know how to say no to the first big client, but he was the one who told us he wasn't continuing. And so we personally were there thinking, oh, wow, this puts everything into question. What we're doing is useless. Looking back, it really helped us refine our pitch and allowed us to secure many more clients. So it's both a significant, a very positive anecdote in Nelson's history, and at the same time, something we eventually had to put aside or are now trying to relaunch. However, the group itself has completely reorganized. And so I particularly recall the pitch I delivered to the CEO of that specific company in France, which was an incredible moment for all 4 of us and truly enjoyable.
And so what kind of lessons did you manage to take away from that in order to retain those specific clients?
At that moment, we just hoped to develop software and that everyone would see that with our software, everything could be done. And so I think that allowed us to realize the ambivalence we had to embrace, or rather to somewhat hybridize our model, namely to perform analysis for clients, to tailor the results for them, and also to show them the benefit of our software's positioning. And so we were in a phase where we absolutely wanted to sell them the software and have it work, when in fact we'd only been around for 6 months. It actually took us 2 years to get something truly productized that really made sense with enough features to meet the overall need. So that made us accept a bit more that consulting would be the way to kickstart our activity. And it also showed us the complexity of key account sales. So that echoes what we were saying. Just one champion isn't enough. When they reorganize every 3 years, you'd better have customer success managers who've identified that and cross-referenced the different contacts within those companies. So for subsequent deals, we organized ourselves a bit differently, but it didn't create huge pivots for us nonetheless.
Has AI made a difference to your business in the last 2 years?
AI in the sense of Gen AI, no. AI has always been present to develop many things for data. So in fact, intuitively, or rather intrinsically, naturally, when you handle large volumes of data, you're doing AI and you're improving, or rather you're improving your data management within your core algorithms. So that has always been there. For internal coding, it's extremely useful for our technical teams, but only with simple copilot tools. I think that AI will greatly disrupt the fleet management industry, and there's an opportunity to seize there, which will take time because it's a sector that moves very slowly. So for now, there haven't been any sudden changes for us because we're in a dusty market. But if it's dusty, there's an opportunity to seize quite quickly there.
Our priority shouldn't be using AI, but rather what order gives us the most value for the client. And that's difficult to untangle.
Explain why it's difficult.
It's difficult to untangle because, in fact, there's a technological breakthrough with AI, certainly. So we tell ourselves we can digitize the fleet management profession. There's another technological breakthrough where we can access vehicle data much more easily. There's another shift that isn't technological, which is it's no longer about liters of gasoline, but kilowatt hours. There's another major change, which is I need to install charging infrastructure, whereas before, I never put a gas tank at my employees' homes. So, in fact, the entire organization of fleet management, we've moved from an administrative role, buying vehicles and assisting drivers, to a role where general management and CSR management demand accountability for decarbonization. The CapEx budget for infrastructure is added, the job can be impacted, and I have data and information coming from all directions. Perhaps I have too many people managing my fleet. So actually, fleet management systems are modernizing, they're electrifying, they're connecting, and you have new technological tools you can leverage. So we actually need to rethink this entire profession. And in what order do you approach this? Do you begin by assisting them with their charging infrastructure? Do you start by helping them acquire more affordable vehicles? Or do you automate their daily tasks? But actually, their tasks are low value added since it's managing their software for them. So that's not necessarily where you'll be most disruptive. So we prefer to start by addressing all the challenges related to the charging of electric vehicles and the vehicles themselves before we move on to automating the fleet management profession. We believe that clients achieve greater savings on matters concerning charging infrastructure and the effective management of their electric vehicles rather than simply digitalizing a profession that already exists. I believe that ultimately these two things will combine, and that's precisely the vision we hold with Amiral and Nelson. But it really takes a little bit of time to genuinely understand the client's core business priorities.
This could potentially be the narrative of Series A.
I really hope so, because we won't be able to solve all of these issues in just 2 or 3 years. However, before we even think about the Series A narrative, we're seeing that fleets are really shaking up, they're moving, that there are changes, things are evolving very quickly, and we have certain narratives that just don't work. Is it no longer good enough? What kind of narrative are you referring to? Well, typically, for a traveling salesperson who has a company car before, you had to reassure them that they would find charging stations along their route. Now it simply costs less, so they switch to electric, period. So he feels obliged to switch to electric because otherwise it costs him too much on his salary. So now we should rather support them in using their electric vehicle or reassure them that tomorrow they'll find their charging station. To address this company car market, there are definitely things to reinvent, which is incredibly exciting because from the very beginning, we've been anticipating this moment when there are too many vehicles, too many electric vehicles. So we need to quickly develop new proposals. So the Series A narrative, it doesn't bring me much. What matters to me is that we don't miss out on a huge value proposition for the client. In fact, potentially, we need to restart things from scratch quite quickly and be open to pivoting in a certain way. And we'll see where that leads us.
And that's going to present new problems, the development of these vehicles, the fact that electric vehicles are becoming the majority.
Now, if your question is from the perspective of whether our electrical grid infrastructure is capable of absorbing this, there's absolutely no concern about that. Are we capable of providing the electricity we need for these recharges in France, much more than elsewhere? We export 100 terawatt hours of electricity annually from France to European countries where the interconnection prices aren't very attractive. So we lose quite a bit of money unless we could negotiate this European tariff better. So in fact, we have every interest in consuming electricity in France and continuing to electrify. This isn't facile here, but in fact, we have electricity available. So there is no debate about that. So we are ready to absorb that. It could create other very localized issues if there's a sudden massive power draw in one specific area, but actually the entire digital infrastructure for power modulation and so on is designed to absorb such demands. Therefore, the general public absolutely must not believe that they will short circuit an electrical pole simply because they've purchased a Clio E-Tech.
What are the real obstacles we're facing ultimately? It's nothing but pure inertia.
There are no more reasons to hold back from choosing an electric car. Everyone's happy to come up with a bad excuse. or I'll be stuck in traffic on the highway, maybe August 15th. Maybe August 15th. That's one day out of 365. Or I'm going skiing. Oh, you're lucky to go skiing. Well, get yourself an electric car for 95% of your other days. So in fact, there's no longer any valid reason for private vehicles. It costs much less. The range is more than sufficient. And to believe that 800 kilometers of range are essential to resolve this issue is a form of techno-solutionism that simply makes no sense. Drive an electric vehicle once, and you'll see you can manage your needs. A charge takes between 13 and 18 minutes when you only need to go from 30 to 80%. So ultimately, there aren't many reasons. However, for fleets, because that's what we're interested in, there are obstacles, especially for commercial and service vehicles. And so there is a genuine need to eliminate this inertia and to help them find a method for prioritizing tasks. Tomorrow's key issue is to control the cost of recharging all these vehicles and to implement and optimize the management system.
And these companies, what brand of vehicles do they buy? What country are they from? Do you see Chinese vehicles arriving massively in Europe?
Companies have very often operated with a single manufacturer, often either with Renault or with Stellantis. So at least for those companies operating in France, they had very rarely questioned these single manufacturer agreements they had in place. Quite a few of them were dual manufacturer. Today, they're not yet completely questioning their agreements with manufacturers. They could have done that when Chinese electric vehicles arrived. In the meantime, regulations have made vehicles eco-scored or not. And so, in fact, you face penalties if you choose non-European vehicles. There are a few new manufacturers, and vehicle fleets are now opening up to these new manufacturers because there are more appealing models available in different ranges. However, I believe these fleets will continue to primarily source from French manufacturers. Obviously, other manufacturers are still present and will maintain their market shares as they already do. That's on the B2B side. But for everything else, the adoption and arrival of Chinese manufacturers and their vehicles is absolutely wild. And their vehicles aren't just cheaper ones, they are really well made. So I'm not inventing anything by saying they are ahead. And I don't know these industries precisely, but it's interesting to see what's happening.
And the autonomous vehicle, by what time frame do you see it becoming a reality?
Regarding that, to be honest, the arrival of autonomous vehicles, I don't have a very precise opinion on it because its main purpose is to replace either passenger transport services or individual personal use. The vehicle we're interested in is a work tool that we'll still need in 10 years to repair heat pumps, to repair buildings, to clean or to deliver. So for these work vehicles, there's a human inside and they do their job outside of their vehicle. So will this autonomous vehicle impact corporate fleets? I don't know. Do you see that in public yet? No, not in public yet. No, not at all. And regarding the general public, I don't know nearly enough about it. But Tesla did make some pretty big announcements about how they intended to operate autonomous vehicles and stop commercializing them in the way they had been doing up until now. So there are clearly some important topics, but they don't really affect our specific market. Today, we are focused on our friends in the fleet industry.
But then, if your job is to accelerate the electrification of fleets, once we go beyond 80 or 80% electrification, that is what, by 2030, 2032, 2035 at the very latest, what will your purpose be then?
You know, for 3 years, whenever I pitch Nelson, I'm always asked, but what are you guys going to do after the transition? So indeed, if you misrepresent what we do, one might think we had the worst idea, entering a market with an expiry date, and that our company will simply die in 5 years. If we do nothing more than what we are currently doing, and the market continues to electrify at its current pace, then we will have already achieved our impact mission. However, as entrepreneurs, our mission certainly compels us to acknowledge that by having placed the appropriate electric vehicles in the correct locations and successfully resolved the issue that currently accounts for 80% of the fleet, specifically all internal combustion engine vehicles. This also places us in a strong position to develop the necessary new services for our clients' electric vehicles. So in fact, we made a strategic choice to focus on the internal combustion vehicles of current fleets rather than on the very small portion of electric vehicles they possessed at the time. Therefore, we couldn't enter a market that had very little willingness to pay and was extremely small. And so we are now concentrating exclusively on electric vehicles. This necessarily implies that we must hybridize our model, meaning we need to be useful for both thermal and electric vehicles. And the core purpose of Nelson's strategy is to state that we are an agnostic player. We control all the vehicle order management data, so we know before anyone else how many electric vehicles our clients will have, where they will be, and what they will do. We know how they are going to recharge, with which charging provider it will be operated. So in fact, we are in a very good position to say, listen, friends, now that we've put an electric car in Robert's hands, we're going to ensure that your kilowatt hour costs are significantly reduced. We're going to accompany him throughout his daily routine. We will, in essence, become the comprehensive charge manager for all aspects of Robert's everyday life. So in fact, we'll position ourselves as an intelligent layer connected to the charging and electricity business for these fleets that have never dealt with kilowatt hours before. Empirically, you even said 80%. I estimate that once 30% of our clients have electric vehicles, there's a willingness to pay for new services. So in fact, that's what we are developing now, the future of electric vehicle management. And so the fundraising round we're closing now is so that in a year, we'll have a clear offer and a clear product. And we already have some leads, but we can't go into all the details regarding electric vehicle management. So time is running out, but the position we've established for ourselves today has truly given us a seat at the poker table to gain an additional advantage. All other players involved with electric vehicles don't yet know exactly how things will function in 5 years. We, however, have secured a significant advantage by working on this transition.
So we will capture what comes after by leveraging the present.
So your first job is being a CEO. How did you learn the job, so to speak, as you went along? Do you have advisors, coaches around you? Are you networked with other CEOs your age or a bit older? I mean, how do you manage to reflect on what it means to be a good CEO day to day?
It's certain that this CEO position at a fast-moving startup, the role itself changes every 6 months. And from my point of view, until you've truly experienced it, you can't possibly project yourself into it or know what you'll need to do. So you just have to get your hands dirty to see what it's all about. The best advice we've been given from the start and which I've applied like crazy since then is that whenever I have a question or look for a best practice, I'll go talk to someone else, ask them the question, and find an entrepreneur. Our allegory is having big brothers and big sisters and big uncles and big aunts. So I have a network of people I try to see again and talk to again. There are some who are currently venturing out at the same stage of maturity as we are, others who possess companies that are 6, 7, or even 10 years old, and others who have established 5 or 6 businesses since then and are much more experienced.
How do you navigate the advice you're given?
Well, the true heart of the matter is that to truly succeed in navigating the advice that people give you, you must accept that you're going to spend an hour discussing and potentially only 8 minutes of that will prove useful. So right from the start, you shouldn't arrive thinking, and after just 3 minutes, this is going to be incredibly useful. So you really need to accept that it's going to take up your time. At the beginning, we met with many people, then narrowed it down to a select few to ensure we were well supported, finding pseudo-advisors, mentors, or other helpful individuals. I discovered the power of lunch, but you shouldn't have 2-hour lunches. So ultimately, I really don't know exactly.
And would you say you have a good filter, because there can be a strong tendency for former entrepreneurs to give advice, and it's not always easy to know how to handle it?
Actually, the point isn't to have the right filter for me to manage to get the right advice. It's to ask the same question to 3 or 4 people, get their 3 or 4 opinions, hoping to find people who tell you, don't listen to me, but here's just what I've experienced, rather than do this. If you get those 3 or 4 options, then you think, okay, there are differences, so it's up to me to choose what I truly want to do with them. And that's how you end up forming your own opinion. Unfortunately, it takes 4-hour-long discussions with only 8 useful minutes each. So it's expensive, that advice or counsel. But actually, we have a chance I hadn't realized as an entrepreneur, is that because you're a founder, you have a pseudo status that makes people respond to you, are eager to talk, and see that not because you're a company director, it's not for their ego, but they figure you are motivated to go and do many things, which is the case for all my friends who do many other jobs. It's also a job in itself. And so people are quite open. They're ready to share their experiences. So you ask for advice and they'll often give you even more. So they really enjoy sharing their own personal stories as well.
And so from the beginning, Nelson, we surrounded ourselves with many people because we knew we needed the maturity of a 35-year-old founder at 25. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to make it big. And it also makes sense in that context to work with Asterion on the second part of Nelson's life. For me, it truly reflects the DNA we've had from the start, and that we can productize in the sense of partnering with some and creating lasting things.
And don't you think that to learn we have no choice but to fail sometimes?
Well, typically, my answer to that is that I feel what led me to entrepreneurship was the desire to hit a wall. Why do I say that? Well, because truth be told, you grow up with a silver spoon in your mouth when you're lucky enough to have parents with means, that you get a good education, that you have no other problems in your life. So you can go to prep school and manage your exams because you feel that life is easy. Actually, you're still in a pretty privileged situation. And then if the entrance exams go well, you get into a good school, and I was lucky enough to do that. And so afterwards, you told yourself, well, I didn't make a single choice, but according to the overall narrative, I feel like what happened is pretty cool. Maybe there should be some real struggles. I'm a big competitor, a bad loser, but I really like to constantly step out of my comfort zone. And so entrepreneurship guided me to try to hit walls and fail a bit. So yes, in order to learn, you really have to make mistakes. Is it about failing or simply living through many different experiences and bouncing back? Now I'm going to start talking about
What's a situation where you've acted like a sore loser since Nelson began, when you lost your biggest client right there at the very beginning?
No, reacting like a sore loser. Of course. I don't know if it's a sore loser, but a bit hasty, saying, "Wait, guys, we have every reason to work together. Why isn't this moving forward?" And so, being a bit too intrusive, too aggressive, and therefore no longer really playing by the market or systems rules, and being a bit too rushed, the entrepreneur who believes everything can happen in 2 weeks and that you have to rush, well, accept that decisions take time, that in fact, if he didn't reply the next day, in 3 months, he'll still have you in mind and it will still be fresh.
Incentives, the temporalities, they sometimes elude you a little too.
Exactly. It's quite clear. And so there's a truly significant irrational element in this within the B2B business world, and I believe in the world as a whole, generally speaking. It's true that when you've never worked before and haven't been confronted with the sheer irrationality of so many things, and on top of that, you're a polytechnician, a mathematician, it's a real nightmare. And so to realize that empirically, I find that super cool, and it makes me realize just how many things I don't know at all. And so there are a thousand things to. It also brings a bit of curiosity to other discussions. So you see, we are not the center of the world, nor are the people we want to convince. Therefore, a little humility is also needed on that.
Okay, thank you.